morning to you, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us today. The show is African Touch. I get to bring you the latest news from across the continent of Africa. But before we get into the detailed news bulletin, I'd like to just give us an update of some of the leading newspapers from across the continent of Africa and others from outside. But we shall start with the newspapers from Kenya. And the Standard newspaper on tax, Ruto is between a rock and a hard place. President was hard pressed to explain the new levies he wants to introduce when the cost of living is at an all-time high, with experts wondering about the economic rationale of the proposed taxation measures. The story is on page 6 and 8 inside the Standard. Villages Mackenzie was chased from before Shakahola. Banks to auction properties as defaults hit 39 billion Kenya shillings. Erdogan headed for a runoff in Turkey election. Health PS Kemsa bosses fired over 40 billion Kenya shillings net scandal, and hustlers to feel heat of sharp fuel price increase. And judges don't force learners to pray when in school. Okay, that's interesting. I think I prayed in all the public schools I attended. It was part of that, but now the judges are saying, no, we can't do that. Okay, so the Star newspaper, Ruto fires PS Kemsa board over tender. And then we just move on to the Business Daily. Gentlemen murdered by dam scandal set for CBK. Gentlemen, okay, it's interesting. And how pump prices will look like after Ruto's 16% VAT. Very well. The People's Daily. Bloodbath at Kemsa. Axe falls on Health PS, making her first top official in Ruto administration to be fired for corruption. Health CS disbands entire board. Picks new team to clean up drug supply agency a day after president promised to act. Team accused of bungling deal on malaria nets. Okay. That is Taifa Leo, our leading Kiswahili newspaper. Serikali yazidi kufinya raia. The Daily Nation. Mosquito nets deal bites fierce. Kemsa bosses more pain for hustlers as kerosene diesel prices jump. Is it for hustlers or for majority of Kenyans? I know when you say hustler, you're referring to perhaps the support base of President Ruto, but I think this is for all Kenyans, especially at the lowest level, who will have problems with the new increase at the pump. Because remember, even the kerosene has been, the price there will go up, so has gone up actually. Okay, let's just move away from that and get on to other newspapers. The Punch from from Nigeria. Military IG warned troublemakers as court hears anti-handover case. Seun Kuti spends night in custody, police plan arraignment. And Nollywood stars mourn as Murphy Afolabi is buried. The Nation as well, that is from Zimbabwe. Government ventures to expedite reforms as preparations for this year's polls gather raise. Zimbabwe woman dodges murder by USA man. And the Herald as well from Zimbabwe. Door open to foreign observers. Debt clearance. Zimbabwe is gearing up to go to its elections in August. They've not settled on a date yet, but I hope they do very soon. And so I think the government is saying foreign observers are welcome. And this thing of foreign observers, we never get foreign observers to go into the European countries to observe their elections. But in Africa and other, maybe the second world, part of the second world, and the third world, a lot of times, we have these foreign observers coming in and observing our elections. It's like we always need somebody a big brother, somebody to just patronize us, so that we seem to want, to do things the right way. But partly the reason to blame for this is because a lot of these elections that we do in this continent, especially here in Africa, we're not even able to fund them. We're not able to afford our very expensive elections. So we have these Western countries, paying for that and helping fund the electoral process, which I think is just off. If there's something that should not be funded by an external actor, it should be an electoral process of a country that is at the heart of good governance, at the heart of stability, at the heart of the people choosing who they feel should represent them best. That is at the heart of the core of what a country is for those who practice democracy. So when you let external forces or external actors or these countries out there come in and fund your elections, you're giving part of your, sovereignty. You're surrendering that to them. I know. The issue about sovereignty and how we like making noise about it when you're out there, and we always want to remind them that we are sovereign. Every now and then, when not a Kenyan leader, when an African leader, majority of them, they're caught up and they're being questioned and abroad by these Western powers. That is the time they bring up the issue of sovereignty. We are a sovereign country, and so you can't talk to us like that or this and that. But when it comes to matters that are vitally important, that we should protect as far as our sovereignty is concerned, like an electoral process, then we are open and ready to have everybody and anybody come in and fund this process. And at the end of the day, they come in with their own agendas. They have stooges that they want to put in place. They have their own interest, and they sometimes even play a role in picking or in influencing whoever they feel would cooperate with them and ensure that they get to win these positions. Not always, but a lot of times, okay? And so as long as we continue having an external hand in certain things like this in our different countries, I think that will be problematic. If we can fund our own elections, if we can fund our own electoral processes, we will not have a need to have foreign observers come in, because I've never heard an observer, from mission from African Union. Maybe it happens, and I'm ignorant of it. That perhaps good look, but I've not heard. And even if it's there, it's not such a big deal as they make it when they come to observe elections here. I've never heard an observer mission from African Union going to Germany, for instance, going to, I don't know if they've got to the US, probably. But in majority of these countries, they don't, because they really don't need any observer person to come. They conduct the elections pretty well. The systems there are clear, and things work well. Plus, they do not want your opinion on how they how they're carrying out the elections, not especially from Africa. But we have allowed them to come, and we have allowed them to participate, essentially, in our elections, because we are unable to fund this very important process in our countries, the bedrock of our democracies that are still maturing, that are still growing. We make steps forward, so many other steps behind. But it is a work in progress for many countries. But as long as we keep having these external players in our electoral system, we shall continue having the electoral violence we see every electioneering period. We shall continue having leaders who really don't serve the interest of their people, because perhaps another actor, funded and aided their coming to power. So when they finally get that power, then they have to be at the mercy of these people. They can't make decisions independently. They can't serve the interest. The interest of the people cannot come first. Okay? And then these same leaders will go and constitute African Union, and then you wonder why things don't move. It starts, and some of these reforms and changes that we need to see in the African Union, these changes must come from the individual countries, and how we choose to do our politics, and how we choose to engage, and the changes that we need reforms in our countries. That is all I'm trying to say. So if you can get it right from the state level, when we go to the collective, that is the African Union, we're able now to get it together, because we come with the values, we come with the discipline, we come with the understanding of our sovereignty. We come knowing that our business is Africa, and Africa and its people must come first. Any other interest is secondary. So when we come with that approach, understanding, having done work that is necessary in our countries, then we can stand in the international, in the global stage and speak with authority. But otherwise, we'll continue hearing such useless statements like that one that President Hakainde Hichilema was making in France the other day that I talked about when he met with President Macron, saying that it is time Africa should wake up and really do change drastically, if at all we were to see any reasonable change. And I still haven't gotten over that, because why does he find the need to go make such statements in Paris while they had a meeting the other day at the African Union Summit in February? They normally have it in February, right? I never heard him bring that up. Those are the conversations they should be having when they meet as a leadership of this continent. Challenge each other, bring each other to account, place the responsibility of moving this continent forward at the shoulder of every head of state, because they all have, together with their countries, leading their countries, they all have a responsibility to play. Every country in this continent, for those who feel they're truly Africa, for those ones in North Africa, it's debatable how they feel and the psychology about being in Africa, but they are in Africa geographically, but their psychology and how they, it's so different. So those from sub-Saharan Africa, we must work to ensure that we change, and we have to be on the forefront of agitating for this change. But that can only happen if we have some good leaders with who are visionary, who have the best intentions, and who are there to serve the people and the interests of the people, and who understand the bigger picture of Pan-Africanism. I think we should start teaching things to do with Pan-Africanism even in our countries, so that it is embedded. It is embedded in our children, in our system, in our value system, even just growing up. You grow up being proud of being an African and understanding that you have a responsibility and a role to play to change the narrative and to change the image and to change the continent for the posterity and for the future generations. So anyway, okay, I'm speaking to the choir, but let's just move on. I think it's just that story on the Herald that has really triggered that court process. So debt clearance, Zimbabwe makes headway. I do have another story to do with that. I think they are related, but I'll bring us just in a bit. Presidential amnesty processes commences, still in the Herald from Zimbabwe. The New Times from Rwanda. Experts on how digital ID will make life easier. The country initiated the legislative process for a digital ID last month. Okay. We have that. Kenya, we're always steps ahead. That's why we're the powerhouse in this region. But sometimes we forget. We're the powerhouse in this region. We have digital IDs. We have the Huduma number, which I think, something needs to be done so that it becomes effective. That will save us from, will ease up certain things. And also we do have digital car number plates now. So Kenya, we're always steps ahead. And so I'm happy to see that a country like Rwanda is following suit, and perhaps others will do too, because where we're heading right now. The world is just becoming more technologically advanced, and so we cannot afford to be left behind. So we could move there by Rwanda. And still on the New Times, Rwanda-Turkish Mari Foundation Inc. deal to advance TVET skills, okay? These are the colleges that focus on skills. I think they're, like in Kenya, they're divided into two. There are those which are business courses, and there are the ones which are technical courses. So at the diploma level, And so that is a good thing. And I think the former regime we had really invested in this area, because not everybody gets the marks to go to the university. But there are those who might not even want to further their education like that, because maybe education is really not their thing. So after they've gotten the required basic education is from kindergarten to high school, according to the United Nations. That is basic education. So once they get that basic education, so they might wish to go and just get a quick skill. And so our TVETs were really strengthened during that time. And there are those in the diploma level, there are those in the certificate level. You can go do a course for 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years, get the skill that you need, go become a proper mason, go become a proper mechanic, go become, because when you have that knowledge, it's very important. Of course, if you add with the street smart, I don't know what that is, but you become better, and the passion that you have over whatever it is that you're pursuing, you become better at it with just a little bit of an added education on top of that. So okay, so I think Rwanda is also trying to do that. So, and I'm also hoping that even in Kenya, the current government, I think it is continuing with whatever was started there by President Uhuru Kenyatta. So that will go a long way in of course, fighting illiteracy, but also just making sure we have a lot of our young people who have skills. And that could really help in addressing the issue of unemployment, because once you go and you learn to be a mechanic, for instance, you don't have to be employed with anybody. You can start with fixing your friends' cars, or gain trust, 1 client, 2 clients, and if you're good, some of these things you just get clients through referrals, and before you know it, you have your own garage and you're doing your job, and you're not knocking in people's doors seeking for employment. So I think TVET, these are areas that I think Africa in general needs to pay a lot of attention to, and give priority and insist and ensure that we have more of our young people who cannot make it to the universities have these skills. And interestingly, in Kenya, since the revamp of the TVET, many students, even those who qualify for university positions, a lot of them prefer to go to this TVET because, as I have said, you can get certificate level curriculums there, and then you can get the diploma levels that go for 2 other 3 years, depending on what course you're taking. And so how they teach and the knowledge that you get and the skill that you get, it really prepares you for the marketplace. This TVET, we should not sleep on this. These institutions are vitally important, and we've seen an increase in Kenya of many students who qualified for a university slot but decided to apply for a TVET course, and they've done it within 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, they're done. I'd say depending on the course that you're taking, because they give you the skill that is needed. It's not too, like a lot of the universities, they focus more on just the knowledge. It's just getting the knowledge and the theory part. But the skill part and the practical part, a lot of these courses lack that. But with TVET, it allows you to really get into practice and the practical aspect of it. And so you leave that course really prepared and understanding what it is that is required of you, well equipped to go to the marketplace. So these institutions should be encouraged across Africa. Okay. All right. The daily news from Egypt. Egypt to study launching renewable energy interconnection project with Europe via Italy. Okay, that's good. Emirati Agthia competes with local investors to buy Egypt's Safi. I don't know what that is. I'm thinking it's a telecommunications company. I could be wrong. So let me just leave that there. 308k tons of corn, I guess kilograms, tons of corn, soybeans valued at $134 million released from Ports Agriculture Minister. Analysis of single plant cells provides new insights into natural product biosynthesis. Egypt, UNDP discussed joint cooperation in health sector. Very well. The Citizen from Tanzania, counting the losses across the board as traders in Kariakoo. They also have a Kariakoo in Tanzania. Okay, Kariakoo, Tanzania's largest and busiest shopping district, close their shops, even as I think Kariakoo is known for, I guess, shopping or okay, anyway. So closes their shops in protest at unfair charges and constant harassment. Okay. So also they have their councillors carries there who are giving traders a hard time. I guess this is just a problem. We have a lot of that here. The frustration that our small traders experience in the hands of harassment by the county officials. The county officials have seen it, and I think it's not just a Nairobi thing. Also in major towns and cities across the country, and I see it's not a problem that is uniquely ours. Even in Tanzania, we have a few of those that are really making life difficult for the small-scale traders there. I know these are the people who really are the backbone of we call them the Juakali sector, are the backbone of the economy, so instead of constant harassment, I think they could work on proper modalities and modernize these things and streamline this, and how they get there. I know those are the reforms we've been doing here in Kenya, and to some extent it's really paying off. But I think there's still a lot of things that needs to be worked in terms of, some of these things you're supposed to comply with, permits and all that. Others are renewable, others are what. But you see, when these askaris, county askaris walk around, they always find something that they feel are doing wrong. And so they're always looking for opportunity to get a bribe. And when they keep looking, they'll find something. They'll find something that might need for you to part with some money so that they can leave you alone. So I wish we could just find ways in just addressing some of these things and just streamlining some of these sectors and ensuring, even if it means just carrying out workshops and to sensitize these small-scale traders, letting them know this is what you're required to have. If you're operating this kind of a business, you need a health certificate. You need to have a fire, something, safety, drills and all that, and have a certificate for that. Have them know, not have them sit there, not having this information, and so you use it to leverage for your own bad behavior, and so you keep taking from these people who are already struggling, especially these hard times. I normally see it happen across the Kenyan CBD, and it's just annoying. It's just annoying, and I'm just hoping that perhaps one day something will be done so that we're able to protect these people, and a lot of them may not be having this information over the things that is required of them outside of the hawkers that engage in running battles with the county askaris every day. But that is a conversation for some other time. Okay, we head over to some newspapers from the UK. iNews, UK backs Ukraine to join NATO. All right, and this is what started the invasion into Ukraine. I don't know how that is going to be. Okay, so let me just read through here. Britain will back NATO membership for Ukraine after the war with Russia has ended. So what will happen is Russia will make sure this war prolongs as far as it can. If you're saying you're waiting for the war to end and then you restart this matter, then I can guarantee you that Russia will not be ending this war anytime soon. Rishi Sunak has told Volodymyr Zelensky, and joining alliance would mean further conflict would be treated as attacks against all members, because that is what the NATO alliance says. If you attack one member, then all members will come in, and that's why Russia has been fighting so hard for Ukraine not to join, because now he'll be having an enemy in the backyard, The NATO was formed, I don't want to get into the Warsaw Pact and all that. The NATO was formed in the late 80s, early 90s, towards the end of World War. Remember when we only had two, the World War the international system was bipolar, US and its allies, Russia, the USSR at that time, and its allies. And so after the breaking off of the Warsaw Pact and all that, and USSR, and the world, it changed, and the US became the superpower. Now we have a unipolar, system. And so NATO alliance came into effect, and it has been built on an alliance. First of all, it is a bloc that, in the international system, helps in the balance of power, period. If you cannot, because for you to survive in the international system, then you must have certain capabilities, like a strong military, like a strong army, like a strong economy. Those three things are important. Okay? Strong army, strong economy, and something else. There are three, okay, for you to really be on top of the world. So remember, after World War II, after the US defeated Japan, the US emerged, and the US was not involved so much in what was going on in Europe. Remember, Germany started the World War II, or some of the events that carried on from World War I that ended in 1919, that came into some of the issues that were not solved then, that became a build-up and then turned into some of the causes for World War II. So in World War II, the US was smart enough not to involve itself so much with what was happening in Europe until it got caught up in, towards the end. That is how it defeated Japan. Okay, remember the Hiroshima bombs? Many years later, the effects are being felt, and so because of that, the U.S. did not use up a lot of its resources. So when the World War II ended, all of the countries, remember, because at that time before World War II, power was concentrated in Europe. World power was concentrated in Europe among about 5 countries: Britain, France, Germany, and few other countries. So jostling of power and power struggles were concentrated around there, and world power was concentrated around there. Okay? So after World War II, they had all used up all their resources. They became so broke, and so they were unable, from World War I and also World War II. So the US was left standing because it was smart enough, and it did not use up a lot of its resources and all that. And that is what gave the US the leverage. And so today, many, many years later, we have the US still as the superpower after at the end of the Cold War. So NATO was formed because if you can, like I was saying, for you to be a superpower like the US is, you must have all these things, like the best military in the world, a strong economy to support you, your patronizing across the world. Like, you must have that to back up your power for you to be powerful. But if you can't afford all that, so what you do is you create alliances for the system to have a more balanced power, because you just have one country that is all powerful and you don't have these other countries to check it, then that is problematic. So alliances like NATO act in the international system to help with the balance of power, which is very, very important, especially after the dissolving of the USSR and all that. So that is, what I was saying about this. So this NATO is really powerful, and the things and how it operates and the ideology behind it. So if you attacked a country in NATO today, just one, you will have attacked all of them. So there's no thinking twice. The way right now you see Europe, others, are not willing to support Ukraine or have a position, or they can choose to or not. When you are a NATO member, you don't have a choice. If Ukraine was a member of NATO, all of those countries have a responsibility to fight Russia physically. Any of their members, when there's an aggression against them by an actor that is outside that union, they can't fight each other, then that alliance, then other members in that alliance, in the NATO, have a responsibility, because attack on one member is an attack of all of them. So that is how that works, and that is what Russia fears, because if Ukraine goes ahead and joins NATO, then Russia will have all of these countries, the 27 now, to deal with. It will be fighting the all of Europe, majority of of Europe. Okay, and so these alliances like this are formed to protect themselves. Like I've said, unless you're a superpower like the US, you can solely protect yourself. But if you can't, because in Europe you also have other smaller countries, and from what happened in World War I and World War II, they learned. So they realized for them to be safe, then they're better off being in an alliance like NATO, so that they are protected. Yeah, they are protected. So if Ukraine gets into NATO, which I know Russia will fight vehemently, and it might prolong this conflict to, unnecessarily, then we will not see the things that, because remember, Russia annexed Crimea in 2013. There was another war that was happening, another invasion that Russia did in 2013, and there's been others before. Okay, so Russia cannot do things like this anymore against Ukraine, because any kind of aggression, the other countries in this alliance will have to take up and stand up physically for Ukraine and help it fight, okay, or any other country. So I think the stakes there will be high. I'm not sure if all, because of what is at stake here, I'm not sure if all members of the European Union will agree to admit Ukraine at this point in time, based off of what is happening currently. I don't know if it will be for the best interest. Will this help in escalating another conflict or de-escalating? Are they ready to be dragged into another conflict? Should Ukraine join NATO? Because you don't know what decision Putin or Russia, if they have another leader, might decide to take in the future in terms of engaging with Ukraine. Will it be what it is today, or they will have a different perspective and a different kind of diplomacy engagement? So we don't know that yet. So there are members in the European Union who might be reluctant to have Ukraine join NATO right now, because of the dangers that could pose and the instability that could bring. And many might not be willing or wanting to go into a war or a conflict, or being dragged into a conflict, because there's no telling on what decisions Russia will make when it comes to Ukraine. Okay, so it's a lot they have to look at. But I guess if they normally speak with one voice, except for lately there are members who speak differently. Like I saw French President Emmanuel Macron when he visited China about a month and a half ago, and he was saying that the U.S. France is not willing France is not willing to support the position of the U.S. when it comes to Taiwan, because the U.S. has always been advocating for, Taiwan to be independent and all that, okay, to be recognized as a state. And so France went there, had a good time with Xi Jinping, came back, and as he was in his flight back to France, he was saying, that is US's position, but that is a position that France was not. They're not willing to be dragged into each and every war that US decides to start and engage in the international system sometimes. And he even made reference to Europe, saying it comes to a point where they'll have to do what is best for them. So the international system is changing, and a lot of these, to be honest, the US starts a lot of wars across the world, and then it forces the rest of its allies in the Western world to align with its ambitions, and sometimes they get to play a second fiddle and help the US fight this conflict, or some of these conflicts that it has started. Okay, so anyway, all right, this one story brought all of this. Okay, so anyway, so the Prime Minister, still on iNews, the Prime Minister gave assurances during the Ukrainian President's visit to the UK. Volodymyr Zelensky was in the UK yesterday. Most NATO member states have refused to give public backing. I told you, they will not agree to the idea, although majority are believed to support the change. Not all of them will agree because of the price tag that might come with that. They don't want to be dragged into that, because maybe individually they could be having, but I doubt, but they could be having some not so bad diplomatic relations with Russia, but also they don't feel this is something they want to be involved with. The economies can take it. They can support and love on Ukraine and its people, but they don't want to be directly involved, to be on a coalition with Russia. Okay, so majority, a good number, might support, but there are also a good number who feel, who are reluctant to support this idea of Ukraine joining NATO anytime soon. So Putin likely to fiercely resist Ukraine in NATO. Like I said, this is what started, we all know that. This is what started the conflict in the first place. But, President Putin has been on an expansionist agenda. He's not over the fact that USSR was dissolved, because at that time the world was a unipolar system. And the fact that the USSR was dissolved by the help of these Western countries, he has never gotten over that. And the reason I knew that is when the last president of the USSR died last year. I don't know if I can remember his name. He's such a well-celebrated figure. And President Putin did not attend his public funeral. Yeah? Mikhail Gorbachev, yes. Remember, he died last year. Like, his history is so interesting. If you can just find time and go look into the details during his rule. He was the last president of the USSR, Gorbachev. And Putin, I guess, was so annoyed the fact that he agreed and he played part of the USSR being dissolved. I think he never forgave him. And so last year, I think it's last year, Gorbachev died. And there was a public viewing, public funeral, and being a former head of state, you would imagine that President Russia would find it within him to go attend. He couldn't. And that could tell you that he did not agree with the ideology and what Gorbachev did. But I thought it was very petty, but he didn't. So I think that is just also one of the things that Russia, or rather President Putin, has in mind. He's never gotten over the fact that Russia was disintegrated, the USSR was disintegrated, because he's obsessed with power. He feels Russia should be in the same position. And do you know, in the international system, Russia is considered to be the second. We have the first world. Russia, China is in the second world. You see this class system. As we're in the third world, I think. We're used to being there, so it's really not a big deal. But for Russia, it feels, no, why are we in the second world? We should be there. We should be neck to neck with the US because, we're a powerful country. That's how, Putin feels. That's how, what do you call him? That president that caused problems in Germany. I'm forgetting his name. The one who oversaw the Holocaust in Germany. Let me see if I can get him. That is how he felt. Okay, anyway, let's just move on. I might stay there a bit longer because I enjoy history. Now, The Independent from the UK. If you think he is a hero, why won't you save him? As Defense Minister admits Afghan pilot was heroic when he fought with our troops, but refuses to halt his deportation to Rwanda. The Independent asks. Okay, so Defense Minister admits that this pilot really helped the UK troops when they were fighting in Afghanistan. And now he's among the people who are set to be deported to Rwanda. And so Defense Minister is saying this guy played a key role. So what the Independent is asking, if you think he was such a good guy and he was such a hero, why won't you save him? Why wouldn't you make a special case for him so that he's not deported to Rwanda? See, this Western people, once they use you and they're able to achieve their goals or their motives, you're done. Nobody cares. The Daily Express from the UK, Suella, white people should not feel guilty. Okay, this is interesting. I have to read this. I don't know if I can see it properly. Suella Braverman has hit out in the war on woke, arguing that white people should not feel any sense of collective guilt over their historic role in slavery. In a barnstorming speech, the Home Secretary lashed out at political correctness, saying the white population do not exist in a special state of sin, and that nobody should be blamed for. The story continues to page 4. I feel like I'll go online and read this whole story. And this comes from a country, of course, she's a what? She's Home Secretary. So she's telling white people not to feel bad for slavery. Yeah, that's rich. Coming from a country that don't even teach colonialism in their curriculum. UK, being the architect and one of the people who advanced, who are imperialist, advanced colonialism. UK does not even have that in their curriculum. So when you find people like this talking so ignorantly, I do agree. Not every white person should feel guilty. They shouldn't. But there should be some level of education that makes people understand why there's a section of the world that feels how it feels about certain things that happened. The current generation might have nothing to do with it, might not be in support of what happened, but there has to be some level of education that opens up their minds and their understanding and enriches their perspective over certain issues. But you can't have that when a country that was, that was built on imperialism and the backs of black and brown people, build the UK, build France, build these European countries, and every time they even this third world tag, it bothers me because everything they have there, the economy, I've told you during the World War I, no, maybe we take it back in 1846, after the 30 Years' War, the Peace of the Westphalia, where they had been fighting against each other. It was a religious war, took a political turn, anyway, too much. So they realized, so that really affected their economies and affected them, and they realized they couldn't fight. So they ventured into the unknown territories, which is Africa and other places, and they needed that. And that continued even after World War, when they had used up all their resources and they were bankrupt. And they came to Africa, and one of the key things was to get raw materials that build up those strong economies that we see today. So they should give us a break. What the people of the UK need is a proper teaching of what their forefathers did. Not that the current generation should feel any guilt, but at least they should know what happened. That should be taught in history. Not to make anybody feel guilty, but for them to reconcile and to perhaps have a better understanding why a section of the world feels the way they feel, why a section of their population feel the way they feel. And this wokeness, she's talking about, why certain people keep agitating for certain issues. But I guess she's just, I don't know, but this is too much ignorance for me. And this tells you somebody who really have no understanding of what the imperialist UK did to the rest of the world. Its colonial history and its colonial marks that are still left in different countries, among the rest of the countries in the UK, in Europe. Germany, they took their colonies after the World War I. One of the key agreements in the Peace of Westphalia was for the Peace of Versailles. One of the agreements in that was that Germany was to lose its colonies, and that's why you see Germany lost. Germany it was the first colonizer of Tanzania. It didn't stay there long. A country like Namibia, a country like, which other? It had maybe 4 or 5 in this continent. So part of the repercussions, outside of Germany losing part of its territorial, land given to other countries, Germany also lost its colonies, okay? In 1919, after the end of World War I. And that's why you see when it comes to colonialism, Germany doesn't feature a lot. And its colonies was taken over by France and the UK. So these people need to know this, so that they stop operating in this level of ignorance. It is appalling. And to be a home secretary and for you not to understand why certain people still feel the way they feel and why they express themselves how they express. Not that we want anybody to feel guilty, especially not, because it's not their fault. The current generation of white people, it's not their fault. It's not their fault that colonialism happened. And so they should not be walking around feeling guilty unless there are those who are still supporting, racial divide and things like that. But history makes you understand and makes you operate from a space of understanding and empathy, Home Secretary. So I'm just, let's just move on. The Times. Fifth of all taxpayers will now be in £40 band. Okay, I'll get you more jets, Sunak tells Zelensky. It's interesting. The Daily Telegraph. Ministers warned of sharp rise in immigration by election. Misogynistic abuse will be banned to tackle online wild website. Okay, so those are the papers we have from Africa and from the UK. I think I've had a good time this morning looking at these papers. So now, because I've had too much of a good time, so my time is really, really gone. So let us look at some news items here that are making headlines from across the continent of Africa. And we start with the latest from South Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa has said there is extraordinary pressure on the country to abandon its non-aligned position on the war on Ukraine. In his weekly newsletter, Mr. Ramaphosa said South Africa will not take sides in what he said was in effect a contest between Russia and the West. His comments come days after the U.S. ambassador to South Africa, Ruben Brigidi, accused the country of secretly providing arms and ammunition to Russia despite its professed neutrality. Mr. Brigidi said U.S. intelligence was confident they had been loaded on a Russian ship at a naval base in Cape Town in December. Mr. Ramaphosa has agreed to investigate the claim, but and the latest from Sudan. Sudan's military Fatah al-Burhan has sacked the acting Interior Minister Ahmed Mohamed Omar, who is also the police chief. In a statement, General Burhan named Khalid Hassan Muhyi al-Din as the new General Director of Police. No reason was given for sacking, but General Burhan had earlier dismissed in similar decrees the governor of the central bank and the two foreign ministry diplomats. The police have been inactive in conflict-hit areas, including the capital Khartoum, since the fighting erupted on the 15th of April. As a result, acts of lawlessness, including looting and robbery, have been widely reported in these areas. A month of fighting between Sudan's rival military factions appears to have no end in sight, despite much touted truce talks brokered by the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. And going back to South Africa, senior military officers from South Africa and Russia have agreed to boost cooperation and increase the combat readiness of their armies. In talks held in Moscow, Russia's defense ministry has been quoted as saying by the state-owned TASS news agency. The high-level talks come days after the U.S. ambassador to Pretoria, Ruben Brigidi, accused South Africa of supplying arms and ammunition to Russia, despite its professed neutrality in the Ukrainian war. The commander of South Africa's land forces, Lieutenant General Lawrence Mbata, led the talks with his Russian counterpart Oleg Selyukov in Moscow, as the news outlet reports. Last week, South Africa found itself at the center of a diplomatic storm with the U.S. after Mr. Brigidi said he was confident the arms and ammunition were loaded on a Russian ship at a naval base in Cape Town in December. And South Africa said it had no record of arms sale. But President Cyril Ramaphosa has ordered an inquiry to investigate the allegations in his weekly newsletter published on Monday. I think I've talked about that. Okay, so South Africa Defense Force confirmed that senior military officers were currently in Moscow. The main opposition Democratic Alliance said the visit was the latest example of the South African government unashamedly showing its support for Russia. Okay? So much for a country that is claiming neutrality, is it? And back to Sudan, the army has attacked the rival rapid support forces around a hospital in the north of capital Khartoum. Video footage shows the building was badly damaged by airstrikes. Overnight, Somali's embassy in Khartoum was ransacked and looted by RSF fighters. They have taken over many homes in the city, and there have been reports of assaults on civilians, including rapes. In a voice message, the RSF leader, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who's better known as Hemedi, vowed to keep fighting. He said Sudan's military leader, General al-Burhan, should be captured, given a fair trial, and then hanged in a public square. Okay. Just when you thought things are going to get better. I don't know what kinds of talks are happening in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. The last we checked, they're meant to be having some talks there. Anyway, let's head over to Eritrea, and the leader, president of Eritrea, Isaias Afwerki, whose on a rare visit out of his country has met China's President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang in Beijing. Mr. Isaias laid a wreath at the monument to people's heroes in Tiananmen Square, which remembers all those who died in the struggle to build a modern China. In 1989, Tiananmen Square became the focus for large-scale protests for greater political freedom. The protests were crushed by the Chinese authorities. Mr. Isaias praised what he called China's contribution to transform the world order. Eritrea is one of the world's most oppressive states. It is frequently criticized by the West for its human rights records, but it is geopolitically important for China. China has a military base in neighboring Djibouti and is seeking to increase its influence across the fragile, the Horn of Africa region. Very well. We move on to Senegal. The unrest in Ziguinchor, a town in southern Senegal, came one day after the expected start of Sonko's rape trial in the country's capital, Dakar. Sonko, the official political opposition leader, was charged based on a woman's accusation that he assaulted her when she worked at a massage salon. If convicted, Sonko faces up to 10 years in prison and will be barred from running for president. According to local authorities, a police armored vehicle struck and killed the officer as it was reversing. A government offered condolences to the officer's family, calling his death a tragic accident. Clashes occurred near Sonko's home starting Sunday evening, fearing police would move to arrest him to bring him to court. Messages have circulated on social media calling for supporters to act as Sonko's shield and defend their leader from arrest. Sonko recently received a 6-month suspended prison sentence in a defamation case and declared he would no longer respond to court summons without his safety being guaranteed. His lawyers told reporters at a news conference in Paris on Monday that Sonko had not yet received a summons but would appear if conditions were met. Senegalese police deployed extra officers in Ziguinchor and elsewhere in Senegal. And in Nigeria, the United States says it has taken steps to impose visa bans on people who disrupted the recent general elections in Nigeria. In a statement on the State Department website, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said the United States is committed to supporting and advancing democracy in Nigeria and around the world. Blinken clarified that the visa ban was specific to certain individuals and is not directed at the Nigerian people or the government of Nigeria as a whole. These individuals under U.S. Immigration and Nationality Act will be subject to restrictions on visas to the United States under a policy covering those believed to be responsible for or complicit in undermining democracy, according to the statement. The decision to take steps to impose visa restrictions, he said, reflects the continued commitment of the United States to support Nigerian aspirations to strengthen democracy and the rule of law. However, the U.S. did not name the Nigerians affected by the latest visa ban, although some Nigerians, including controversial Lagos bus transport chief Musiliu Akinsanya, popularly known as MC Olomo, were caught on video threatening potential voters. Nigeria's most recent presidential election was held on the 25th of February, was fraught With a number of irregularities, including pockets of violence, the election produced Bola Tinubu as president-elect. He will be sworn in on the 29th of May, although his two main opponents are challenging his election in court. Nigerian authorities are yet to react to the news of the U.S. visa ban. They forgot one more person, but I will digress, or maybe two. Okay, so the African Development Bank said on Monday it had developed the financial tools needed to make over $3 billion to compensation payments to white farmers who lost land and others assets in Zimbabwe. The bank's president Akinwumi Adesina, while speaking during a press conference in Harare, said the new proposal would leverage capital markets to avoid aggravating Zimbabwe's debt situation. He did not provide further details. And Zimbabwe agreed in 2020 to compensate local white farmers whose lands was taken by the government from 2000 onwards to resettle black families in one of the most divisive yet popular policies of the Robert Mugabe era. The expropriation triggered a barrage of Western sanctions and an isolation against Zimbabwe. The Southern African country's economy collapsed from the ensuing high inflation and debt, and of course, the sanctions. Okay, so let me just quote part of that report by this AFDB head, yeah? That is why the African Development Bank is currently working with the government of Zimbabwe to develop innovative financial instruments and structures that can be used to front-load the mobilization of the $3.5 billion for compensation. I encourage development partners to work together on this proposed structure, which can help leverage capital markets to find the compensations without additional debt for Zimbabwe. I don't know, he's not very straightforward in how this is supposed to work so that Zimbabwe can compensate these white farmers. You know, this story is very touchy, and if I bring in my African self into it, I may not be very objective. So let me just move away from that and just touch on one quick story here about Eritrea's leader. First of all, rarely do I hear Isaias Afwerki left Asmara, that is the capital of Eritrea. I hardly hear, unless he's attending an AU summit. Outside of that, he hardly leaves the country. President Isaias Afwerki hardly leaves the country. I don't know if he's paranoid or I don't know, because you know Eritrea is very, it's not stable. Okay, we don't get to hear much of what is happening in the country because of how close it is and how the government controls the media and all that. There's no freedom there, so there's not much that you hear. Every now and then he talks, but it's not an open country like that. It's just like North Korea. In fact, when I think about Eritrea, it's very much like the North Korea of Africa. It's a very closed country. For obvious reasons, when you have such a leader, that is what you have. So he went to China. So after he went to China, together with the president and the prime minister of China, the premier, they went to this Tiananmen Square. It's the monument to the people's heroes. Okay, he laid a wreath. I think what caught my attention in this story is what this monument means in the history of China, which is quite paradoxical with what we see happen today. Very oxymoronic. So in 1989, the Tiananmen Square became the focus for large-scale protests for greater political freedom. That is what they were fighting for in 1989, for greater political freedom. So China people love freedom. China people could, when you talk about political freedom, maybe would enjoy some other form of democracy. I don't know, if they were given an opportunity. So in 1989, they were fighting, and this conflict claimed a lot of lives, and so many people were hurt. I've read very little about it, so it is something that I'll go do proper research, and then maybe I'll come here and tell you the story. But the protests at that time were crushed by the Chinese authority. The same thing that the China government has been doing, crashing down on protesters in the mainland China, and also remember what happened in Hong Kong very recently. It's not too long ago. And for them to go lay a wreath there over in and based on what this place really represents, I just find that to be quite something. These are two leaders who don't believe so much on political freedom. Let's just talk about the truth now here, right? They don't. But they had the audacity. Is there not any other place that Isaias Afwerki would have gone to lay a wreath over something? I'm sure there are very many historical places that has great importance to the people of China. But I think having him come lay a wreath here at the monument to the people, which these people fought and died and shed blood while demanding for freedom that the Chinese government could not give them, something these two governments continue to do, muzzle on any kind of freedom in their countries. But they went and laid a wreath of a monument that signifies the longing of freedom, political freedom, and these other kinds of freedom in China. That is something there, okay? So Isaias praised what he called China's contribution to transform the world order, which China has really been doing a great job in that. It's really trying to transform the international system, and slowly but surely, China is getting there. And before we know it, this unipolar system, as it is now, will be challenged. It is being challenged already by blocs like BRICS, and there has been conversations whether will the international system be more stable if we continue having this unipolar system, or we have a multipolar system. It is a conversation that is ongoing, and so the BRICS and these other alliances and these other countries are really trying to challenge the international system as it currently is. So what Isaias Afwerki, the president of Eritrea, is saying is really not far-fetched. It's actually the truth. And China is really trying to have its influence on countries, and it's doing that through aid, through development, through this, through that. And so it's been able to gather some level of influence across the world, and I think that is something that really worries the United States. And it's frequently criticized by the West for its human rights. We know that, Eritrea. So I just found that to be very interesting. Isaias Afwerki can go anywhere if he feels that will serve Eritrea well, and the interest of Eritreans will be served, and the interest of his country. He can have any alliance with anybody. That's not a problem. The fact that he went to China is really not a problem. Leaders, that is what leaders do all the time. But the fact, it is where they went to lay that wreath that I'm finding to be very oxymoronic, because they don't believe in what those people did and died in 1989. These are not the same ideologies the governments are standing for. In fact, they keep fighting and clamping down on such people. So for them to go there and stand and lay a wreath and remember these people who are, and yet, if those people are alive, they'll still be fighting what is happening in China and in Eritrea. That is quite something, the audacity. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for your time this morning. I'll probably see you again at 3 p.m. with more news from across the continent of Africa. It has been a pleasure. My name is Miriam Ogotu. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.